Hey, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, depending on when you've tuned into this edition of Hypnosis Week Live. If you're on YouTube, Zoom, or another video channel, you'll be able to see both of our faces right now. If you're on one of the audio podcasts, well, you're not going to have that pleasure unless you go and seek out the video channel as well, which is where you get the benefit of seeing our body language and facial expressions or any visual demonstrations that my guest may give you. Now, the lady I'm going to introduce you to today was, according to her website, and we're going to believe it as being true, was born on the 3rd of March 1979. I'm not quite sure about that, Laura, looking at her on screen. I'm sure she looks younger than that. She's, in a nutshell, I'm going to get her to explain more about herself as we go along, but yes, she does do hypnotherapy. Yes, she has trained in NLP and hypnotherapy. She's the author of 2 books, one called Stop Anxiety and Grow Confidence, another called Creating Trance and Hypnosis Scripts, both available easily on Amazon and other major booksellers, I must say. She also runs conventional NLP hypnosis trainings through a company, not that one, through People Building Limited. Then obviously she offers the hypnotherapy services for myself and colleagues through hypnotherapy and nlp.co.uk. Don't worry, you don't need to remember these. The links will all be below the video or audio podcast speaker symbol thingy on your podcast channels. She's got a YouTube channel, which we'll come to later, because I think I may have found a one that's not hypno-related. Otherwise, she's got a doppelganger, one of the two, but we'll cover that. And what more, maybe not in her opinion, but certainly in the opinion of many of her peers and colleagues, more significantly in 2005, with one of her colleagues, Kay Jill, she set up a company called NLP for Kids, using the tools and techniques drawn from NLP and other modalities, not surprisingly, to help children in many ways. And we're going to delve into that during the interview. So please welcome to the show, Gemma Bailey. Hi, Gemma.
Hello, thank you for the introduction.
Well, I've not covered everything, but, you know, it's an overview so that you can... one thing that jumped out at me before we get into depth about your journey is you were born in Hemel Hempstead. What is it about Hemel Hempstead and NLP? Because that's also, I don't know if it still is, but it was the head office of ANLP, wasn't it?
I know, it's like the centre of the NLP universe here. And I'll tell you a funny story about it is when I first was launching my businesses, I, like a lot of people do, was still kind of like one foot in doing a proper job at the same time. And my proper job was working as a nanny. And on my first day of this new job as a nanny that I started working with, I took the children to school, and I was hanging around outside like the year 2 class with the one that I was dropping off, and one of the other mums was there, and she was very friendly, and she said hello, and she said, so, you know, is this your main job? Because obviously the kids are at school all day, so do you do anything else throughout the day at all? And I said, well, I do, but, you know, you've probably never heard of it before. I use this kind of methodology. It's a bit like an alternative kind of psychotherapy, a bit like CBT, and it's called NLP, and it stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And she's, hi, I'm Karen Moxham. I'm the director of the ANLP. And I was like, okay.
Excellent.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the NLP is like based in Hemel Hempstead. I have no idea why, but it's the centre of the NLP universe.
I know, it's weird. So look, there was a time, I know a bit of your background because I looked at your website, and we did meet in person. Crikey, where does time go? It's years ago now. The Hypnosis conference that Valerie Austin set up in London. What was your journey to get to where you are now? Because there was a time when Gemma wasn't this NLP, as I hate that term, but NLP, oh yes, we help people, NLPers, but I mean, it gets bandied around. What led you to where you are now?
So I feel like I was already in a helping profession. I started out, so my very first career was working with children. I am a nursery nurse by trade. Um, and I think I went into that profession with grand ideas about being able to help children and young people kind of grow up to become the best that they could be. The joke that I always make when I'm doing events and stuff, I thought that I would be changing the world, and I ended up changing a lot of nappies. So I think I got quite disillusioned quite quickly. And I also realized as well, whilst it's absolutely fundamentally correct that children need to have a really solid routine to help keep them feeling safe and secure and certain in their own lives, actually for me that's really boring. And so I ended up chopping and changing jobs a lot, and it took a while, a couple of years really, to realize that it was never the jobs that were the problem, it was me. And as soon as I'd got into somewhere and I'd mastered the routine, and I was like making changes and got the place to be the best that it could be, then I was bored, and I just didn't feel like I could keep growing in jobs like that. So I was proactively seeking an alternative, and I kind of hit a bit of a wall because it's a very niche qualification. And although you end up, I ended up in nursery management. So I was managing staff and managing the budget and finances of the nursery, and so on. So all of that was happening, but it's still a qualification for working with children. And I was working for a company, a day nursery company, that were not very good employers. And I'd a month off with appendicitis. And so I'd really been given a chunk of time to sort of reflect on what I was going to do next, and like, where would I go from here? Because I'd made my way into management, I think, by the age of about 24. So I'd hit the ceiling a bit too soon. And yeah, just didn't know, could I actually do this for the next sort of 40 years of my working life? And it just didn't really sit well with me. So I started looking into hypnotherapy and NLP simultaneously as a result of seeing the new stuff that Paul McKenna was doing after he'd kind of ended his wacky stage show career. And it interested me. So I became interested in it, probably more for self-development purposes, rather than having the agenda of actually turning it into a career for myself. But I guess for a lot of people, you end up going down the rabbit hole and then you never come back out the other side. So that's what happened.
So I'm going to ask the obvious question. If there's any questions you don't want to answer, you don't have to. I'm just going to ask the things I suspect people watching or listening want to ask. So right now, that leads to the logical question: do you think you found the answers you were searching for at that time, personally?
Did I find the answers? Yes and no. So still say that I'm a terrible hypnotic subject. I'm not very suggestible. So that's always been really frustrating. So that didn't kind of go the way that I might have hoped that it would go for me on a personal level. I feel like when I look back now to where I first began with all of this, I kind of feel like, and maybe this happens for everybody, maybe everybody sort of looks back on who they were, I don't know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever, and feels like the evolution is so great. I feel like I'm having a different life completely to the one I had back then. It's like I've got somebody else's memories. And I logically obviously know that they're mine, and there are bits about the who I was then that I still resonate with now. But like, I think if I met old me, I would like her, but I would also be maybe a bit frustrated at how narrow her worldview and view of herself was compared to how I think now. And maybe that is something that like naturally occurs for people over time and, you know, through their aging process. But having looked at the people that, you know, maybe I went to school with, I wouldn't say that that's true of all of them. You know, there's a lot of people who seem in a lot of ways to have, you know, pretty much stayed the same. Whereas I've made a very conscious effort to keep kind of growing and learning and expanding. And I don't think I've got all of the answers, but I think I've also made peace with the fact that I probably never will. And actually, that's quite exciting in itself.
That's an interesting point. I like that. That perhaps you never will, and that I like that because there's too many people in, or just say the self-help industry, in my opinion, whether it's NLP, hypnotherapy, whatever bloody title it's got, because they're roughly all the same, who portray it as the absolute answer to everything. And I always say, well, it can do some amazing things, but no, it's not a I can't even say the bloody word, panacea, is it?
Yes,
it's not a cure-all. It can do a hell of a lot, but so I think it's really cool that you acknowledge that. But by the same token, at the other end of the scale, you do get amazing results and life-changing benefits, especially not just with adults, but especially through NLP for kids with children that's grown massively over the years. I mean, carry on, because you're only part way through your path that got you to where everything is now.
Yeah. All right. So I did my qualifications in NLP and hypnotherapy, which, as I'm sure you know, are almost using the word qualifications feels somewhat disrespectful at times, because they, you know, can vary quite considerably in what you can learn. So on the other side of the very first training that I did, I felt okay about like delivering hypnotherapy, but not with the NLP. Mm-hmm. So I actually retrained and I did the whole lot again with a different training provider to, I guess, just wrap my head around it a bit better, because I didn't feel confident with what I'd learned. And then I went on to do my trainer's training, because I thought, actually, I feel confident now that I could probably teach this stuff in the future. And they were very immersive and intense experiences. But again, it still wasn't, and maybe it never is like everything that you could possibly know, but it was a good foundation to get. So I met Kay Gill on my trainer's training, actually. So she was a fellow NLPer, and she was the one that said, you know, we're all here doing the same qualification. We're all going to be in competition with each other. We need to do something different. And she said, I think we should work with children. And I went, nah, now I'm done with them. Like, that part of my life is over. But she twisted my arm and then quite promptly left, actually, afterwards. So Kay ended up getting married and moving up to Birmingham to set up an insurance business, which then took up really.
Oh dear, slightly froze
like
there.
Maybe the very first. Oh, sorry, I will rewind a little bit. If it happens again, let me know and I'll switch
you
the
got
Wi-Fi.
to saying insurance company in Birmingham.
Right, yeah. So yeah, she moved up to Birmingham to start up an insurance company up there. And we'd probably got to this stage then of maybe putting together the first program that we wanted to deliver to children, but not much more beyond that. And as a result of promoting that first program, I noticed that a lot of fellow peers that were coming to me saying, what are you doing? Like, what's in it? How's it working? Tell me more about it. And I figured that if they wanted to know, that could be a program in itself. Mm-hmm. And so for me these days, I guess, as much as I spend an awful lot of time still delivering sessions for both adults and young people. I actually also now spend a great deal of time training and teaching people the skills that we use in NLP for kids. And essentially, I went back through everything that I'd learned through my practitioner, my master practitioner, places outside of that, and said what stuff here would be relevant for young people, what stuff here can I translate into a child-friendly language, because you'll know there's a lot of clunky language within NLP. And so it needed some decoding in cases. And then over the years, I've then sort of developed my own NLP-esque type techniques that are kind of exclusive to NLP for kids, where, you know, just over time I've sort of on the cuff done a process and gone, well, let's kind of blend this with this and throw some of this in there and see what sort of a result we get. And then it's like, actually, that worked really well. We probably need to formalize this in some way. So over the years, I've trained like hundreds of people in both NLP and NLP for kids, literally the world over. Tail end of last year, we were obviously working all online because of lockdown. You know, we had people from Australia on the training. We've trained people from Spain, from Bahrain, from France, like all over. And then a collection of those people will go on to join the NLP for kids team, which means that they join the
the picture freeze again, and I've lost your voice.
franchise side of the business.
Damn, we lost suddenly. It said, and join the team, and then it picked up again at franchise side of the business. We had a slight screen freeze and voice loss.
Right, I'm just going to switch my Wi-Fi network. If it cuts me off, I'll call you straight back.
Okay, I can always lob the recordings together. For the people who are listening or watching, that might be what happens.
It might be. 1 second.
No worries.
Are we back?
We are actually back.
That was pretty seamless.
Quite
impressed.
Actually, we were just playing with you. She really didn't do anything.
Nothing happened. Nothing's seen it. Move on.
So yeah, a number of them end up getting involved with NLP for kids. Tell us a little bit more about NLP for kids, because that isn't a training course as such, is it? It's actually a business structure as well, a franchise as such.
Yeah, so it's actually both. So there are some people that come on board just to do training with us, and then they don't do any of the business stuff with us whatsoever. That is probably most applicable when we have people like teaching assistants, for example, who want to utilize the skills within a classroom setting, but actually don't want to run a business because they've already got a job. So in some cases, we have schools who pay for certain members of staff to come and do the training with us, so that then they haven't got the cost of paying for a practitioner from us directly. And they've literally got someone in-house 5 days a week delivering the stuff that we deliver. So we offer the training as the kind of first port of call. And then for some people on the other side of that training, they do want to go on and run a business, be a practitioner, you know, become self-employed and all of that jazz. In which case then we then kind of start them on a slightly different journey where it's more about the ongoing business support, CPD that's included within that, referrals of clients to them from, you know, the various different streams of advertising that we do, and just, you know, generally helping them to cut a lot of corners with regards to things like website setup and making business cards and all of those sort of growing pains that you have when you're first getting started running a business.
Cool. Yeah, which is what a hell of a lot of packages, courses, what trainings, whatever you bloody want to call them, don't really, well, as far as I'm concerned, don't cover in any real depth. And even the ones that do cover it to some depth, frankly, what they teach is bloody outdated and next to useless in the real world of getting business.
Yeah, I've had those experiences as well. You know, the very first course that I did, there was maybe a day, so it was a 3-month course. It was 3 weeks over the course of 3 months. There was maybe a day spent on like the business and marketing side of things. But I guess in fairness, the other thing to consider is that it changes so fast now, you know, with us being in the technology age. So very quickly after completing that course, like the internet took off, and where they'd been telling us, make sure you do a Yellow Pages advert, it was like, you know, within a year, the Yellow Pages didn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So I guess that's one of the benefits that there is from being part of the NLP for Kids team, or I'd like to think there is that, you know, being part of a bigger organization means that you kind of get to figure things out firsthand in terms of, you know, what's the latest trend? What should I be doing to sort of grow and develop my business? I just started playing with Clubhouse. Is it called Clubhouse last week?
Yeah, Club, the new social media app for people. This has been recorded on the 18th of January 2021 to put it in context if people get this down the line, and everybody's got it. But at the minute, it's only available on iPhones, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
How are you finding that? Because you set up, as I understand it, you kind of set up a room,
Yeah.
but it's voice only.
Yes.
And that room you might call NLP for Kids, and at 8 o'clock UK time or whatever time today, you're going to do a talk on, I don't know, NLP for Kids to help them be more likely to do their own work or something. You give it a title, people show up, and as I understand it, because I'm not on iPhone, you see, they can metaphorically put their hand up, and you can then, if you want, unmute them so that they can ask questions, or you can even get them to take the stage and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. So I've not delved into it too deeply. I've not set myself up in a room.
Right.
I haven't set up my own room yet, but I've been into other people's rooms. To me, it seems a lot like podcasting, but kind of live, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you've got a live audience there with you whilst you're broadcasting your content. I think it could be good. You know, I think it might be one to keep an eye on for the future.
I'm seeing a lot of people, certain, I'm going to use the term celebs in our industry very loosely, because that's a very, it's a very ridiculously minefield area there, but who are reporting that they've already made a shitload of money out of giving free talks on Clubhouse.
Yeah, it might be the way forward. But whether or not it sticks remains to be seen. You know, there was a trend with Periscope. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody's really, like, does anyone still have Periscope? But I mean, that was good for a while. So, you know, it's one of the things that when you are running your own business, you can easily get distracted by kind of all of this different stuff that pops up. And then actually you end up not having the time that you're supposed to have for either seeing your clients or really marketing your business. So I think that's probably one of the benefits that people see with something like NLP for Kids is it saves them reinventing the wheel, and it means that, you know, there's just that access to stuff that they might not be able to either have the time or finances to explore for themselves independently.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm playing devil's advocate, but I'm guessing, because it's NLP for Kids and the nature and the mission of the company and stuff, that one of the prerequisites, let alone learning anything about hypnosis, NLP, or whatever modalities is, you've kind of got to, I guess, and there is a reason why I'm asking this.
Yeah.
You would think you've got to like kids, but there again, you would think the same about children's entertainers and teachers. And I know a lot of teachers and children's entertainers, and they absolutely hate kids. And yet they're brilliant teachers or children's entertainers. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, it helps, definitely. Yeah, for us, there's a few hoops to jump through. For people to come on training with us, we always DBS check them anyway. Beyond that, if they actually want to go on to join the franchise team, they then have to provide 2 references. They have to complete a formal application process, including an interview. They do safeguarding training. They do pediatric first aid. They have to have data protection, and we have to be able to get them insured as well. So there's quite a lot to it, alongside, obviously, ideally, you know, a love of working with children. I remember, because we do get a lot of people that are interested just in having a franchise business, and not necessarily a children's franchise business, but they just see franchising as an easy way to start their own business, which of course it is in a lot of cases. And I remember this one chap saying to me, I'm really on the fence. I'm deciding between you guys and a wheelie bin cleaning franchise. and I said to him, I think you should go with the wheelie bin cleaning. Because, if what we do isn't enough to sell it to you, then you're probably not quite the right fit for us.
Excellent. Bloody hell. I mean, there's no comparison, is there?
There's really not.
Want to clean out stinky wheelie bins or work with kids?
Yeah.
Bloody hell. Bizarre. So what if people do the training or come into the franchise, what kind of stuff are they likely to find themselves doing? I know there's probably a broad spectrum. You already mentioned teaching people up who are in schools and nurseries. What I mean is, for example, therapists watching or listening to this probably have encountered in the past, I believe it was Sigmund Freud, who talked a lot about the formative years, 0 to 7, apparently, when we get
influenced
both positively and negatively, and that creates the programs that run that kind of affect us in the future that have to be dealt with, changed, adapted, or whatever. Now, personally, I think it's more like from birth to around teenage years, and then kind of freezes.
Early 20s even. Yeah.
So what sort of things do they encounter?
So typically we would say we work with 3 different groups in kind of 3 different locations. So the groups that we work with are children, parents, and teachers. The different areas that we work in tend to be in the community, so working with groups in the community, in schools, and in private practice. And then in terms of the sorts of challenges that we are helping people with, it's pretty broad. In the early days, I was quite shy, I guess, about connecting us with mental health, because it just felt like that's a little bit too medical in a way. And so I was very much focusing on, we're confidence building, we're helping with self-esteem. But the truth was that actually that's not what the schools, at least, did not want that back then. Like back then, schools were really about show us the difference you can make in academic performance. And then as mental health started to become more widespread and problematic in children and young people, then the conversation started to shift towards tell us what you can do to support them with anxiety, stress, depression, and stuff that was really sort of moving us more towards that mental health barometer, if you like. And I remember I was talking to the former chairman of the NSPCC, and he said, don't be scared of that terminology, because it's just about having a healthy mind. It's not really anything more than that. And if you help people with being more confident, you help them to avoid anxiety. If you give people self-esteem, then you help them to avoid things like self-worth issues and body dysmorphia and these sorts of things. So he was like, you have to start talking about mental health. And it's kind of snowballed, I guess, since then. I think we were probably all in agreement that our young people were really on the verge of a mental health crisis. And I feel like with what's happened with COVID, we're going to end up with like COVID PTSD in a couple of years' time. I mean, things have like really spiked for us now, but I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think, the real storm is yet to come, because I think that as a species, we're very good at kind of coping when we're in the moment. And then it's later when we reflect on it and go, oh shit, that was really bad.
Yeah.
But then, you know, the issues start to really kick in. So I think that that will happen further down the line. And I guess this isn't just based on inclination, it's also that the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, so CAMS, as people will know it, that's like the free service that's provided by the NHS. So if you go to your doctor and say, my child has anxiety, they refer you on to CAMS. The waiting list for CAMS in most areas of the country is at least 3 months. In some areas, it's way, way more than that. And the service is really, really flooded. And the downside of having to wait that long is when you have a 7-year-old who is anxious, who then has to wait 3 months, 6 months, 9 months for any treatment to begin, is what started out as quite a low level problem starts to really manifest into something much more significant. And for us as a private service, you know, one of the benefits is that we can turn stuff around really quick. We can probably see you next week. So that has meant that our workload has escalated, that our private practices are far busier than they ever were, but also that without using the word referral, we've got people going to CAMS now and saying, what do I do? Do I wait for you guys or do I go and see Gemma? And they say, just go and see Gemma. Like, see her in the meantime until we can offer you something. Maybe that gets the problem solved. You'll still be on the waiting list. And so it's happening more and more that, you know, one of my practitioners is consulting for a neurologist at the moment. You know, so we've got other sorts of opportunities that I think were probably not there for us 10 years ago, where, you know, not just the world was quite close to the idea of NLP, but it was quite close to the idea of mental health in general. Whereas maybe we've just sort of stood the test of time quite well. Maybe it's just that we're in more of a dire straits, is more of a sort of desperate situation happening where, you know, more traditional clinicians are kind of looking and going, okay, what are the alternatives? Like, who are the alternative practitioners out there? Can they help? Is there something they can do?
It doesn't help funding being taken away from conventional routes either, does it?
No, absolutely not. No. So one of the things that I've worked quite hard on for the last 3 years, we have a not-for-profit company as well called Superheroes. And through that, I can apply for different grants and funding. We do our own fundraising as well. And it means then that when we do get inquiries for help where people can't afford the services of NLP for kids, we can, in some cases, have Superheroes step in
Sure.
and offer the sessions at a sort of subsidized rate, or in some cases, you know, without charge at all.
Excellent. Nice one. So that's kind of how you got to where you are now, so to speak. You've briefly touched upon this indirectly in that answer by mentioning that you know, you kind of see that there's going to be issues that manifest once we're out the other side of this lockdown stuff, which, let's not get into that, but I strongly suspect, putting my truth researcher hat on, some viewers and listeners will go, you mean conspiracy theorist? No, truth researcher, because it is a genuine fact that the World Bank's website, the World Bank that lends money to all the governments around the world, their own website, no conspiracy, have pretty much labelled it the COVID project, and you can find it on their own site, and the funding is planned for governments around the world till early 2025. So this is, even if we're all unlocked and allowed to get on with our lives before then, they are already planning that it's having some kind of economic world effect till early 2025. Otherwise, it won't be on the World Bank's website, and that will, anything economic has a knock-on effect on everyday life and ultimately people. And so I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, I suspect we've got a lot of knock-on effects to occur, and that will obviously lead other areas open to you in the future. But what other things do you predict moving forward? What your sort of goals, dreams, ambitions, desires? places you want to take stuff?
Well, that's quite a big question. So
It is.
I think I might be on the verge of going down another rabbit hole.
Ooh.
Yeah, from the last lockdown, so like almost a year ago, because it changed my working routine, as I'm sure it did for a lot of people. One of the things that I committed to was taking a little bit more time off. And with that extra time off, I've started to do some other sorts of study. And one of the things that I've been studying for the last few months is neuropsychology. And partly I've gotten into that field because so my mum has a rare brain disease, which luckily was identified quite early on because I noticed that her behavior was changing and said, something's not right here. There's something is going not straight in her mental state any longer, and I think it needs exploring. So actually, we ended up at a point where they couldn't really pin down the diagnosis because she wasn't ill enough yet. And then I had an idea of what it was. And it wasn't until that, they were able to see stuff in brain imaging and that sort of stuff that they went, actually, you're right. So I kind of accidentally ended up learning a decent amount about neurology and how changes in the brain can then affect the way in which people behave, how they feel, and how they are interacting. And off the back of that, it coincided with me having a few clients come to see me where I suspected that there was something neurological going on for them. And whilst I'm not in a position to diagnose anything, obviously, I have been able to then direct them to the right next step for seeking out the diagnosis that they need. And so far, I've been pretty on the money when that's happened. So I've had probably somewhere around 5 cases over the last couple of years. So not lots, but stuff that's quite extreme and severe. One was someone that was having a temporary psychotic episode.
Okay.
So it was quite severe. One was a lady more recently who I suspected had an early onset dementia, which it turned out was also true. And so I want to kind of start not really bringing that into the work that I do, but I think alongside it, let's say, because I sort of feel like if I'm going to keep getting, as I've just mentioned, more of the CAMs fall out, the young people that are not able to access those sorts of services yet, and if the mental health issues continue to grow in severity, as I think they will, then I kind of feel like I need to be a bit better armed for noticing what might really be going on for someone and not just tackling it as if it's an anxiety related disorder when actually there might be something more serious going on. So I'm just looking to upscale my skill set. And my hope is that in time that's something that the practitioners that are part of NLP for Kids can benefit from too, whether that is additional training that we put in front of them. So every month I do like a live webinar with them where we go through a case study. And the one that I did in January was like their first wild card, where it was actually more of a psychiatric disorder. But I didn't tell them that it was. And so I just kind of said, here's the case, this is what's presenting. And then they said, oh, well, we would do a swish pattern and we'd do some anchoring and blah, blah, blah. And they're kind of going through it. And then I got to the end and I said, do you notice with this client that they lie? And they said, yes. And I said, do you notice that they hurt animals? Yes. And then I went through this whole list going, do you notice they did this? Do you know? And I had about 11 points and I got to about the 7th one and somebody went, oh my God, they're a psychopath.
Yeah.
There we go. So it's like, I just want them to be able to, again, it's not to diagnose, but it's so that we can more effectively direct people onto the right services if we're not the right service. So I just want to make sure everyone's upskilled for what might be coming a little bit further down the line.
Excellent. Yeah, and especially in the context of what you do. Because I mean, a lot of therapists, don't get me wrong, the therapists who are dealing with adults or kids are going to encounter at some point people who yeah, they might be there saying they've got phobia, anxiety, panic attacks or whatever, but underneath there's a shed load more going on that could be, as you say, more in the serious mental health or psychiatric area. But the majority of therapists probably won't, because the job in bread and butter, smoking cessation, weight loss. Although if they were to dig deep, a lot of people with weight management issues, there are underlying mental health issues. So I think it probably is something that the industry as a whole should perhaps look at a bit deeper.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I think it's just about having an awareness, you know, what am I looking out for here? What am I seeing here? Is there anything that's kind of raising a few extra flags? And then being able to, I think, you know, one of the other things that we see a lot in our field is we've got a lot of lone rangers out there working as therapists and practitioners who don't get things like supervision, who don't get things like, you know, just a touch base at the end of the day to say I had a really challenging client today, who don't get that opportunity to just sort of talk through stuff. I think that's really important. And that's, I think, probably one of the gems that's within NLP for kids, is that it is a network of people. Like literally, I switch our WhatsApp on silent sometimes because they do my head in. But there is so much conversation amongst them around, I've got this has shown up. Someone has said this to me today, a child responded like this, I've got this particular issue. And the fact that they're conversing with each other just gives us a lot more opportunity for someone to go, this might be a better way forward. Have you thought about safeguarding for this one? You know, or whatever else it might be.
Mm-hmm. Slightly, I mean, with what you do, it's essential, obviously, both, well, it'd be essential from a marketing, perceptual marketing point of view, but it's also essential from a legal point of view to have DBS checks in place and whatnot. What would you say to therapists listening? Because they don't legally need to have a DPS, which for viewers and listeners, that's the English thing that used to be called CCRB's Criminal Records Bureau check. It's a certificate to basically say you're not a paedophile in the context of what we're talking. Or you're not an axe murderer or whatever, just in case you don't have such a thing in your country or it's called something different. They don't legally need to be a lay therapist, and yes, whilst it would be wise if they're going to do anything to help kids to obviously have parental consent, and at the very least have a parent or guardian present who is probably sat outside the door, but with the door open at an angle so it's the child's got some privacy and freedom to feel they can work with the therapist without the parent knowing, but by the same token, the child is safe.
Yeah.
Personally, I always tell my students that if they're going to do anything with kids, for the sake of what it costs, get a DBS, even if it's only from the perceptual marketing point of view. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say if nothing else, it gives you more credibility. You know, it lets the world know that you're actually taking your business seriously. And that you know, you care about your reputation. The one thing I would say with DBS checks, I know some people, you know, even people that I've met through NLP for kids, some people have been anxious about having a DBS because maybe they have got something on their record from where they stole a bag of sweets from Woolworths in 1985 or whatever. So you know, when a DBS is done, if there are any convictions that are on there, you can have that then almost like risk assessed, so that someone can look at it independently to see, well, does this person still pose a risk? Is this crime spent? And then, they write like a short report, like a risk assessment, to say this person doesn't pose any hazards to the general public or to children or anything like that anymore. So I would say, even if you've got something which is old, historic, that maybe you're a bit embarrassed about, you don't necessarily need to put a copy of this thing on your website. I would recommend that you don't anyway. But it's really just so that it's there. If somebody wants to ask about it, then you've got proof that it's done already. And I think, if nothing else, it just makes you seem like a more credible, viable person who takes your industry and your business seriously. So I'd always recommend it.
But obviously, if you do, but if people watching or listening were thinking of perhaps, I know, like for example, Sheila Granger, she came up with a thing for exam nerves and stress in the Yorkshire area, and went in, and schools, in my experience, although there's no legal obligation as such or law saying you've got to have a DBS for the schools to let you in if there are going to be teachers present and you're not left on your own, I found in my experience that most of them ain't letting you through the door unless you've got your DBS.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think for us, it's really, really rare, even for parents, to sort of ask to see a copy of the DBS, for either myself or the practitioner. Maybe I had like one or two, and they were GPs, so they were just a little bit more savvy, I guess, with that kind of thing. There is certainly going to be some environments where you are more likely to get checked than others. I'm going to be talking for an organisation. Is completely online. They're doing like a bit of a conference for children during the lockdown, and they've asked to see a copy of my DBS. If I didn't have one already, then actually I might be waiting 3 or 4 weeks for that thing to arrive in the post, and I'd probably miss out on that gig. So there are definitely times where having it just helps. I would recommend it.
Just as a side note for viewers or listeners to be helpful, if you're in England, if you're not in England, DBS is kind of irrelevant. You'll have your own version and do the research, but there'll be some sort of similar thing. But in England, if you Google search a company called Acorn Direct, they are based in the northwest of England. They are a third-party company who can get your DBS for your enhanced DBS, because you can't do it yourself as such.
Exactly.
But this independent company can. That's how I got mine. Anyway, excellent. Crikey, we're getting close to the nearly 50 minutes mark, so we've only got about 10 minutes left. Time just disappears. We might overrun a couple of minutes. As I was checking out some of your background and getting me bullet points, you've either got a doppelganger or you have a YouTube channel that isn't NLP for kids. It's Gemma Bailey, and there's, at first sight, it's makeup tips and stuff, and then when I look more at the about, it's to do with, I'm going to say this wrong. If I do, I apologise and correct me. Melasma, MELASMA.
Yeah.
Basically dark discoloured skin patches and how to deal with it. Can you explain a bit about this, your YouTube channel, what it's about? Because
I've actually got 3 channels. So
right, okay.
Yeah, I've got a channel for NLP for kids. I've got a channel for people building, through which I publish the People Building podcast, and then I've got my channel, which is just like, that's like my downtime channel, if you know what I mean. That's like the one that I go to when I'm sick of psychology, sick of NLP, sick of clients. And it's like one of my hobbies is, if you can see the room that I'm in at the moment, there's like makeup palettes, there's wigs. I like doing a bit of Photoshop stuff as well. So I like sort of creating stuff, basically. And I have a skin condition called melasma, which is something, it's quite rare. It mainly occurs in women, and it's where you get patches of skin that hyper react to sunlight. And so for me, what happens is I end up with what looks like a map of Africa, like down the side of my face. And when it first occurred and I didn't know how to get rid of it or manage it, I had to use makeup artistry to cover it up so that it blended in with the rest of my face. And like I tend to do with all other sorts of aspects of my life, I basically documented my journey of how I overcame it, worked around it, and have kind of protected myself from it since. And then ended up with a bit of a following of other people all over the world who suffer with the same kind of skin condition, who have then reached out to sort of ask advice and get some tips on products and bits and pieces like that. And then off the back of that, I ended up getting some sponsorship and people were sending me products and like, try this, try that. So yeah, probably the year before last, I guess, was maybe when I was like super proactive with it. Then last year, I got super proactive with finishing my house decorating, which I've just done in the last couple of weeks. So yeah, I hope to get back to doing. I actually did a video for that channel yesterday, and I think the first thing that I said in the intro was, like, I've just done so much filling my brain with like new psychology stuff. I just need to sit here and put on some eye makeup and just do something which is just not in any way academic or intellectual.
And yet, ironically, I would argue that an offshoot, a repercussion of doing those things, aside from dealing with and managing the skin condition, is a positive knock-on potentially on people's mental health.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because it's I think I'll say young ladies because it's mainly ladies that suffer with this condition. It's on your face, and so you can really feel like the world is judging you. And people don't realize what it is, so they'll make quite insensitive comments at times, and so it really does affect people's confidence levels. And I guess, like anything with your appearance, if somebody's carrying extra weight that they don't want, it has an impact on their confidence and their self-esteem. So I'd say this does something fairly similar to that. So yeah, I guess in some ways, helping people to manage it or even to completely overcome it in some cases does, sort of for them feels life-changing.
Excellent. Oh, we've only got about 8 minutes. So I'm going to just quickly look at my bullet point list. You already answered that. We've covered that. Okay. Other than the obvious that I'm actually going to ask you if you can, after we finish, just to save me searching for hours. I found your Gemma Bailey YouTube channel. If you could just send me the links to the other two, because then I can put them again along with your websites below the video and below the audio podcast, so people can check you out, find your books, see the videos, find out more, and then reach out to you and stuff. In general, in a more generalized hypnotherapist that encompasses adults as well, but it's a big field. What would your, let's say, top 3 bits of advice that jump into your head for anyone starting out be in terms of building a business in this industry? Whether that be advice related to actual therapy, or it be advice in terms of building it. It doesn't matter. Just whatever jumps to your mind.
All right. So one of the first things that I have to sometimes push our new practitioners to do, which I think is super important, is not to overthink it and just get out there and do it. There's a lot of people who come out of training and go, I just want to go back through all of my notes before I get started, or I want to watch all the DVDs before I get started. And it's like, if you constantly have I'll just do X before I get started, you will never get started. Mm-hmm. So I think you will never feel fully prepared. And sometimes you just have to kind of bite the bullet and crack on with it anyway. The other thing I would say is do prepare as much as you can. So I remember, you know, my sort of early days going through all those teething pains around just silly stuff. Like I take notes when I first meet a new client, and, you know, just to get a bit of a case history down, just like make sure you've got two pens, because one day one of them is going to run out of ink. And you don't want to be a situation where you haven't got another biro knocking about. You know, make sure you need to have like a bit of a checklist for yourself. So like switch your mobile phone off. Make sure you got two pens and not just one. Make sure you've, like when I first worked out of somebody else's office and not my own, I forgot to take something to lean on. So I had like my note paper, like my consent forms and consultation forms, and nothing to lean on, you know, silly stuff like that. So just kind of almost rehearse it so that you kind of get all your practical stuff lined up for when you get started. And then I guess the third thing would be keep marketing, because otherwise you'll have these peaks and troughs in your business where you market like mad, get a ton of clients, and then you stop marketing because you're too busy with the clients, or you think I've made it, and you just like don't bother doing the marketing anymore. And then suddenly the work dries up because you did a good job and they don't need to come and see you anymore. And then you've got to restart the marketing machine, and it might take 3 months for you to see the return on that effort that you put in. So you've got to keep that marketing machine like constantly whirring in the background and not make it an on off process, because otherwise you'll never have consistency in your business.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. Thank you so much, Gemma, for sharing your time and your insights and experiences and knowledge with us. Everyone watching or listening, look below the video or the speaker symbol on your podcast channel. You will find Gemma's websites, YouTube channels, social media channels and stuff. Go and check them out. Go and get her books off Amazon. Go and look at the videos, dip your toe, and then reach out to her if helping kids or the other areas she's talked about are something you'd like to look into more. Then the answer's right in front of you. Thank you so much, Gemma. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And I normally, you know, before the lockdown, it would have been join me next week for another edition. As it is, keep checking the channel, because we're putting things up every couple of days at the minute. It helps keep my sanity during this lockdown as well. Thank you very much. Take care, Gemma.
Thank you. Bye.